You know, there's a lot of people who think your stomach is here, but your intestines are here. So when you hold this, say, my intestines are here. Feel here just under your ribs. On this side, that's where you will find your stomach. You can feel the bottom of your rib cage on the left side of your body. Can you feel that? That's where your stomach is. Here's the digestive system to give you an idea of where it is situated and what it might look like inside of your own body. Your digestive system is composed of your alimentary canal, also known as the gastrointestinal tract. Oh, that's a bit of a mouthful. So let's call it the GI tract for short. It is a long, twisting, continuous tunnel through which food travels, gets broken into microscopic molecules, and the bits the body needs are absorbed into the bloodstream from specific parts of your alimentary canal or GI tract. You should know that your alimentary canal, GI tract, runs from the mouth all the way through to your anus. Remember, it is a continuous tunnel or passage from mouth to anus. Also part of the digestive system are the liver, gallbladder and pancreas. Here's a clearer image of these important organs, and they are vital, absolutely essential organs in digestion, but unlike the alimentary canal, food does not pass through them. Instead, they produce and deliver essential chemicals to help break down food. These organs add special compounds into the GI tract or alimentary canal, mainly enzymes, to further break down partially digested food. But unlike Deliveroo or Just Eat, these organs provide what the body actually needs, not fast food. I'll get back to them later, not Deliveroo, the organs of course. Let's make things a bit easy by using a diagram that's much easier to follow. So let's make sense of what we eat. It starts right here. We place food at the beginning of our digestive tract, that's into our mouth or oral cavity. Placing food in your mouth to eat is what we call ingestion. And yes, that is the scientific term for food entering your oral cavity. So this is your mouth or oral cavity. Connected to the oral cavity, we have these glands coloured in a beige colour. They are salivary glands because they are glands that produce saliva. Your saliva contains salivary amylase, an enzyme that will start to break down the food that we chew, specifically starch. Can you find out what foods contain starch? A bit of homework for you. Chewing food, with your teeth of course, that's mechanical digestion, physically breaking the food into smaller pieces, but enzymes from saliva act on the munched up food and begin a chemical breakdown. Did you know that you can produce as much as 1.5 litres of saliva every day? That's a lot of spit. So those salivary glands coloured in beige produce our saliva, so we call them the salivary glands. Connected to the oral cavity, we have our throat, and the scientific name for the throat is the pharynx. The pharynx connects to our esophagus. You might know this as your food tube, but that's not very scientific, is it? When we swallow our food, it's going to take that food from our oral cavity or mouth all the way down to our stomach. Food will travel down the esophagus into the stomach, where it's going to undergo a bit more digestion because the stomach has muscles that squeeze on the food, churning and sloshing to mix it with hydrochloric acid and enzymes to help break down some of the food as well. But we also want to be able to control where food goes and where it doesn't, and where the stomach acid goes and where it doesn't go. So one of the things that we have in order to prevent things from going where they're not supposed to go are these muscles called sphincters. Sphincters are circular muscles.
A sphincter says what?
They work to close off parts of the digestive system to stop food going forwards and backwards. We have 2 sphincters in the esophagus, one at the top and one at the bottom. These 2 sphincters are very important as they prevent acid from your stomach going back up into your esophagus and then up back into your mouth or oral cavity. If the acid gets up into your esophagus and then your oral cavity, it does start to burn a bit, and you'll know this as acid reflux or heartburn. Let me know in the comments why this is known as heartburn, because it has nothing to do with your heart. So the sphincters prevent that acid from travelling the wrong way. Then on the other end of the stomach we have something called the pyloric sphincter. Oh, another sphincter. Sphincters all over the place. We need this sphincter because we want food to stay in the stomach for a long enough time to undergo sufficient digestion before it goes on into the intestines, or the small intestine I should say. Isn't the digestive system an amazing thing? It does all the thinking for us. So the pyloric sphincter will be closed off until ready for that food to move from the stomach into the intestine. When the time is right, the pyloric sphincter muscle will relax, open up, and the food can squirt from the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. So the partially digested food in the stomach travels into the first part of the small intestine, and we call the first part of the small intestine the duodenum. The duodenum is this section, or the beginning of our small intestine. A lot more digestion happens in the duodenum of the small intestine, and you will recall I mentioned the liver, gallbladder and pancreas earlier. This is where these organs come into play, at the duodenum. We'll come back to those organs in a bit, but remember, food does not pass through them, but they are absolutely essential for digestion. Let's go through the rest of the small intestine, and you'll notice the rest of the small intestine is like a long, scrunched up sausage. The length of the small intestine is around 6 metres. It can even be longer. You know, that's about the height of a 2-storey building. You're probably asking, why is it so long? Well, I hope you are. The reason is to prolong the time that the food is in the small intestine, because nutrients need to be absorbed out of the small intestine into the bloodstream, and this takes quite a bit of time. The small intestine also has a vast surface area, but we won't go into that in this video. That's for another time. The body doesn't really want to waste any nutrients at all, so we have this long, curvy small intestine so that food stays in the small intestine a long time, and that's so we can absorb every nutrient that we can out of the food that we are digesting. Right, so digested food has travelled all the way through the small intestine, and it has reached its destination at the end of the small intestine. Now into the large intestine, and it's not large because it's longer, it's actually much shorter than the small intestine, but it is wider. That's why we say that it is the large intestine. It also has another name, a more scientific name. You'll know this as the colon. So the colon, or large intestine, it's exactly the same thing. Now all those nutrients have been absorbed into the blood out of the digested food, and what's left now enters the large intestine. Can you see this little pouch hanging off the bottom of your large intestine? That's your appendix, and for years people thought it was just a useless leftover bit from evolution. But now we think it actually helps to store good gut bacteria, and when you have diarrhoea, hope you don't, and flush out your intestines, the appendix might help bring back the good bacteria to keep your digestion on track. The colon has a few different sections, but we'll save those details for another time. The main thing to know is that food moves through it in a kind of up, across and down path before heading out of the body. So what's the purpose of the colon? Well, it's to absorb water out of the food or the remnants that are in your colon. We absorb all the nutrients out through the small intestine into the bloodstream, and then from the large intestine, what we're doing now is we're absorbing all the water back into the bloodstream. And that's why when you have diarrhoea, you get dehydrated, because your body hasn't had time for the water to be reabsorbed from your large intestine or colon. Both your large and small intestines have a lot of blood vessels associated with them, and that's because they allow nutrients and water to be absorbed straight back into the bloodstream, or straight into the bloodstream I should say. Now we're at the end of the digestive tract, where a few more important parts come in. First, the rectum. It's basically a storage area for poop until it's time to go to the you-know-what. Then there's the anus, the opening where waste exits or is ejected. That's egestion. So when you get rid of stuff from your back passage, that's egestion. When you take food into your mouth, that's ingestion. When we poop, we want control over when it happens. It's not so good if you don't have that control, if you know what I mean. And that's where two sphincters come into play. Oh, here we go again. More sphincter muscles. The internal and external anal sphincters. The internal one works automatically. You don't have to think about it. You don't have any control over that internal one. So if the external one is not working, I think you should look out. So the external one, though, is under your control. That's the one that you squeeze when you need to hold it in, when there's no toilet about. Meanwhile, the internal one just keeps things in place until it's time to go. So we've covered the path food takes, but there are also a few important organs that help with digestion, as I mentioned earlier. And you'll recall that food does not pass through them. These organs make and release chemicals that help break food down. Can you remember what they were called? Well, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So first up, the liver. One of the body's largest organs. It makes bile, a substance that helps break down or emulsify fats. That just helps them to be digested or acted upon by enzymes. Right under the liver is the gallbladder, a small sac that stores bile until it's needed. So bile is made in the liver and it's stored in the gallbladder. When you eat something very fatty, the gallbladder releases bile into the small intestine, remember, specifically the duodenum part, through a tube called the bile duct. The pancreas also connects to this system, and you might know it for making hormones like insulin, but it also produces digestive enzymes. These enzymes travel through the pancreatic duct, mix with bile, and get released into the duodenum to help break down food. So, while food never enters these organs, they play a huge role in digestion by squishing out bile and enzymes right where they're needed. We could go further, but that's for another time, as this is just an overview, and mainly for anyone who doesn't know much about the digestive system, but particularly cooking enthusiasts who wonder what happens to that lovely food you make. Thanks for watching.